Hi, and welcome to Prepping Essentials. If you pay attention to what's going on in the world, you could be forgiven for thinking that the world is in danger of collapsing right now, for a whole host of reasons, particularly if your main concern or reason for prepping is the threat of war. This year has seen tensions between the US and Iran escalate into actual shooting, albeit on a very small scale so far. But as that conflict rumbles on, this week alone we have seen additional and quite disturbing news about Russian planes encroaching into South Korean airspace with actual shots being fired by the South Koreans, and news that North Korea seems close to completing a new and very modern ballistic missile submarine. It's therefore easy to be distracted as to what could be the more realistic crisis events you should be prepping for in 2019. So let's take a look at my own top 5 things to be prepping for in 2019. I'll start in no particular order with something that I've covered in a previous video, which is food shortages. No matter where you happen to live, you will have seen news stories about weather events disrupting the planting, growing or harvesting of crops. The US has been badly hit by heavy rains and floods across a large number of states, which just happen to be the main crop producing regions. Stored crops have been destroyed and planting's been seriously delayed, or in many cases hasn't happened at all. And this same problem has affected numerous other countries across the world. On the opposite side of the weather coin, severe drought and late frosts have hit many countries, with Australia being particularly badly hit. Again, this has happened in numerous other countries across the world, and harvests will be significantly reduced or in some cases non-existent. Disease has also hit the food production system across the globe, with African swine fever leading to the destruction of pig stocks across China and several other countries in the Far East. And as if this wasn't bad enough, the bee population across the world has also been decimated by a disease called bee flu, which will have a knock-on effect on the pollination of crops, leading to significantly lower crop yields. All of this convinces me that food is going to get very expensive, and for some items there'll most likely be shortages, whatever the price you're willing to pay. So I'm definitely prepping by putting away more food into my long-term food storage. Next on my list is the economy. Most of you will remember the massive financial crisis in 2008, which caused banks to crash, companies to close, and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people losing their jobs, and in many cases their homes as well. The crisis and resulting recession was not a gradual decline, it happened literally overnight, but its effects can still be felt today in many places around the world. Unfortunately, recessions like this are a regular part of the business cycle. Generally, it's just the scale that's different as each one comes and goes. They generally occur every 8 to 10 years, so if anything, the world is now overdue a business downturn or recession, and many people are now predicting that its arrival is imminent and that the effects could be far worse than that in 2008. Since 2008, not a great deal has changed. The recovery was fueled by countries literally printing fake money, or quantitative easing as they prefer to call it. However, a byproduct of the economic repair has been the availability of cheap credit, which has been snapped up by eager businesses and consumers to fuel a spending spree. Household debt has continued to rise, but the national debt of countries has exploded as governments borrowed to keep themselves afloat. Problems caused by bad debts in the housing market have been substituted for bad debts accumulated in student loans and car finance loans, many of which have absolutely no chance of ever being repaid, and which instead will be added to the debts of banks or a country's national debt. It's inevitable that another recession will come. It's just a case of how bad it will be and whether or not I will be one of the unlucky ones to lose their jobs this time around. So I'm definitely prepping by reducing my debt and saving a reserve fund of cash which is not in my bank account. Next on my list is civil disorder, or a breakdown in the rule of law. In the Western world, this is something that does regularly occur, but incidents are usually very random or isolated, and they're usually brought under control by the authorities very quickly and with the minimum of disruption to normal daily life. Civil disorder can arise for numerous reasons, and widespread or significant civil disorder would definitely arise if major food shortages occurred or if there was another financial crash. However, over the past few years, another cause of major civil unrest has begun to occur. Political divisions in countries around the world have polarised, and this has caused significant and often violent disagreements to break out between different political groups. Last year we saw the start of significant civil disorder in France, which is still continuing today. Over the past few years we've seen rising tensions in the UK over the subject of Brexit, and in mainland Europe there's political unrest and civil disorder in a number of countries. The same can be seen in Asia, and with the presidential elections due next year in the US, we're already seeing signs of significant political divide and a growing number of political protest rallies. Here in the UK, I'm definitely prepping for civil unrest in the event that Brexit does not happen. I'm doing this by setting aside long-term food stores, reserves of cash, and the means to adequately defend my home and myself from intruders. Next on my list is the potential for a global pandemic. I've touched on the subject a number of times in previous videos. Most recent was when there was a major measles epidemic in Europe and the US. I'm fairly certain that most of you are aware of the most recent outbreak of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Ebola is an extremely lethal disease. Thankfully, over successive outbreaks, it's not yet managed to go global, but this most recent outbreak continues to grow and spread. It's already managed to cross into a neighbouring country and to move from the more remote rural areas into a major city. So much so that this week the World Health Organization declared it to be an international emergency. In less than a year, and despite a coordinated effort by global agencies, Ebola cases have risen, and so too has the death toll. This week the statistics stand at 2,592 cases of infections and 1,743 deaths. The real worry is that an infected person manages to get onto an international flight, and this outbreak actually does go global. So I'm definitely prepping for this, as I consider it to be the most likely global disaster that could occur. In addition to the preps I've already mentioned for other risks, I've stocks of protective clothing and sanitation products set aside in my long-term stores. If there is a report of an infected person in the UK, this would immediately trigger my bug-in and isolation plan. The last item on my list is also the subject with which I started this video. That's armed conflict with Iran. While I think and I hope that we'll not actually see a repeat of the Iraq War, I certainly can't rule it out. War is a great moneymaker for the military-industrial complex, and a great number of politicians in different countries do seem to be spoiling for a fight with Iran. The US and Israel have a long history of seeking regime change in Iran, and Saudi Arabia wants to stay top dog in the Middle East. so it seems that the odds of a peaceful resolution to the current situation are not great. However, if a war does start, then be under no illusion that the war will not be over quickly. Iran has far superior forces and weaponry than Afghanistan or Iraq, and neither of those wars were short or indeed actually won. My main concern if a war does start is not the bombs and missiles that will be dropped in Iran itself or into the neighbouring countries. That's because these are geographically too far away to cause physical damage outside of the Gulf region itself. What does concern me, though, is the control and support Iran wields over a number of terrorist and militia groups far outside of its own borders. Iran does have a proven ability to wage proxy wars in countries all over the world, so my concern is that we would see a significant rise in terrorist activity here in Western countries, especially in the UK and the US, for which Iran reserves a particular special hatred. The key to coping with any potential crisis situation really is being prepared in advance, whether that's keeping an eye on the news media, whether that's mainstream TV or the internet or your own personal contacts, or whether that's putting aside stores of food, water and equipment so that you can enable yourself to survive for lengthy periods of time, either hunkered down in your home or safely away in your bug out location, away from the general population. With that in mind, give a little bit of consideration to the potential risks that I've mentioned in this video, along with all of the potential risks that you yourself might have that I've not mentioned in this video. I've kind of focused on what I think are the most realistic 5 that could happen this year or in the very short term. There are, of course, lots of other potential risks, and it's up to you to make your own plans and to consider what stores and supplies you might need for whatever particular risk it is that you think might be coming along. Well, that's it for this video. I do hope that you found something in there that was of use to you. If you did like the video, then please do click on the like button. Also, feel free to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done that. As always, welcome any comments, questions or suggestions you might have. What is it that you think has the potential to happen this year or in the very short term? Are your risks different to my risks? If so, let me know what they are, and even let others know what it is that you're doing to prepare for them. But for now, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.